Welcome, beloved anointed ones. Faith isn't loud until it wins. You weren't trying to impress the world. You were busy obeying a whisper. Let's be real. Most people only follow God when there's Wi-Fi, mood lighting, and the blessings are already pre-packaged with express delivery. But you? You chose faith when fear was louder, stronger, and fully funded. You chose belief when the evidence looked bankrupt. And here's the twist. Someone powerful saw it all. They saw you turn down offers that looked like gold, but smelled like compromise. They watched you walk away from comfort like it owed you nothing. And while they didn't say a word, while they pretended not to notice, your obedience got archived in heaven and bookmarked by someone with influence on earth. Here's a fact to marinate on. In nearly every major move of God throughout history, the ones rewarded were never the loudest. They were the most faithful when nothing made sense. And guess what? That's exactly who you are. While others went viral, you went vertical. While they ran after likes, you ran after light. And now, something is shifting in your favor. Oh, and by the way, don't be shocked if the very person who ignored your grind suddenly wants to have a conversation. Funny how influence wakes up once faith proves it doesn't need it. So buckle up. This isn't just about spiritual reward. This is divine recognition from someone who finally sees what heaven always knew. Let's get into it. Number 1. You were willing to look crazy in public while trusting what only you could hear. You were willing to look absolutely crazy in front of everybody just because you trusted a quiet voice no one else could hear. That's not easy faith. That's the kind of obedience that breaks human logic. People laughed at you, rolled their eyes, called you naive, dramatic, even delusional. You gave up good-paying jobs, walked out of relationships that looked perfect, and declined invitations that most people would have killed for, all because something in your spirit whispered, "This isn't your path." And while you couldn't prove it, and God wasn't explaining himself, you kept walking. That's next-level trust. You didn't try to defend yourself. You didn't waste time trying to make sense to people who were determined to misunderstand you. You just moved, quietly, awkwardly, sometimes even painfully, but you moved in faith. That kind of spiritual posture is rare, because most people need a guarantee before they leap. You leapt with nothing but a prayer and a pulse. And here's the wildest part. Someone was watching. Not just anyone. Someone with power. Someone who's used to seeing people bend, fold, and perform to be accepted. But you didn't kiss up to status. You didn't play the game. You moved with a conviction that made you stand out, even when you weren't trying. While others were shouting for attention, your silence had weight. While they were busy networking, your isolation became sacred ground. What you didn't know is that this person, this influential one, has been burned by fake loyalty. They've seen too many people sell their souls in shiny packages. But you reminded them that integrity still exists, that purpose still walks around in human form. You didn't beg for their recognition, but your faith did the talking. And now they're not just impressed, they're ready to reward what you carried when no one clapped. Number 2, you didn't just endure darkness. You declared war on it without a backup plan. You didn't just survive darkness. You charged straight into it with no guarantee of rescue. And you did it without a backup plan. That's not something most people can understand, because the truth is, when life gets hard, most folks start looking for the nearest escape route. But you stood your ground. You faced attacks, betrayals, silent seasons, breakdowns, and instead of running, you kept showing up. Not because you had it all figured out, but because you knew quitting was not an option. That kind of spiritual boldness isn't taught. It's born through fire. There were moments when fear clawed at you. Your body was tired, your mind overwhelmed, and still, you chose to fight battles that had no human solution. That's how deep your faith runs. You weren't fighting for approval. You weren't fighting to be seen. You were fighting to stay aligned with something bigger than yourself, something eternal. And that terrified people around you. They couldn't understand why you didn't break like they expected, why you didn't lash out, why you didn't seek revenge. But it's because you weren't just surviving. You were being sharpened. What makes this even more powerful is that someone influential saw it. They saw the pressure you were under. They saw how unfair it was. and they noticed how you kept pushing forward with no applause, no support, and no safety net. They've seen people collapse under far less. They've watched so many give up the moment things got uncomfortable, but you fought like your purpose depended on it, because it did. Now this person who watched from a distance sees something they can't ignore, resilience that can't be bought, and faith that can't be faked. You didn't look powerful while you were going through it, but your endurance screamed louder than any victory speech. That kind of strength leaves a mark, and someone with real reach is ready to honor the warrior you became in the dark. Number 3. You walked away from safety without a map because you trusted a voice they couldn't hear. You walked away from everything that looked stable, people, places, routines, without a clue of where you were going, simply because something deep in your spirit told you to. That takes guts most people don't have. You didn't have a blueprint, you didn't have a timeline, and you sure didn't have applause. All you had was that inner pull, that sacred discomfort that told you staying would cost you more than leaving ever would. You chose movement over safety, and to most people that looked like madness. But to God, that was faith in action. People called you irresponsible. They said you were ruining your future. But what they didn't see was that you weren't chasing a fantasy. You were following instructions. That kind of obedience can't be explained to someone who's never been called by something higher than their own ego. You weren't trying to be different. You were trying to stay alive on a soul level. And because of that, you were willing to disappoint people you loved, walk through seasons of loneliness, and lose access to everything familiar, just to stay in alignment with God. What no one told you is that obedience is louder than credentials to the right eyes. Someone in a position of power saw what you did. They watched you give up temporary comfort for long-term purpose. And while they didn't say anything at the time, they were deeply moved. Because they know how rare it is to find someone who will walk away from the crowd just to follow conviction. Most people play it safe. They wait until the path is clear and the risk is gone. But not you. You stepped into the unknown while everyone else stood still. That kind of spiritual confidence is unforgettable. And now someone who's in a position to open real doors is finally stepping forward. They didn't forget your sacrifice. They saw how you moved when no one clapped. And now they're ready to honor what others dismissed. You didn't just choose faith. You proved it with your feet. Number 4. You took hits in silence because you knew God was watching the replay in HD. You took hit after hit and didn't say a word, not because you were weak, but because you were spiritually trained. You understood something most people never learn. Not every battle deserves your energy, and not every insult deserves a response. You let people talk, slander, twist the truth, even try to assassinate your character, and you let them. Not because it didn't hurt, but because you knew God was documenting every detail. You knew the replay would reveal the truth in HD when the time was right. That kind of self-control doesn't come from pride. It comes from discipline, wisdom, and divine awareness. They thought your silence meant you had no comeback. They mistook your stillness for shame. But what they didn't realize is you were choosing peace over pettiness on purpose. You weren't reacting. You were collecting evidence in the spirit. And while they were running their mouths, you were building endurance, elevating in character, and proving to heaven that your ego wasn't in control. That's rare, that's powerful. The world celebrates those who clap back the fastest. But real power doesn't yell. Real power knows it doesn't have to explain itself because truth always rises. And someone with serious influence caught that. They saw how you didn't retaliate when you had every right to. They noticed how you carried pain with dignity. They watched how you moved with precision, not performance, and now they're remembering you. Not because you tried to impress them, but because your silence spoke volumes about the kind of leader, warrior, and vessel you truly are. It takes strength to speak, but it takes divine authority to stay quiet and still win. Your silence wasn't absence, it was warfare. And now that person in power, the one you didn't even know was watching, is stepping out of the shadows. Not to congratulate you on how loud you were, but to honor how you stayed calm, clean, and calculated while chaos surrounded you. Number 5. You didn't choose fear. Disguised as logic, you chose what had no guarantee but God. You had every chance to choose what looked safe, what made sense, what would have made your life easier on paper, but you didn't. You saw through the trap. You knew that just because something sounded logical didn't mean it was right for your soul. And while people around you called it wisdom to take the easy road, you recognized that fear often wears a mask called common sense. You didn't fall for it. You didn't trade your anointing for approval. You walked away from deals, circles, partnerships, and paths that would have given you a quick win but cost you everything that mattered in the long run. You knew deep down that comfort can become a coffin if it's not where God called you. You felt it, how certain opportunities were laced with quiet compromise, how some offers had strings attached to your silence. And instead of forcing it or faking it, you let it go. Not because you had a better option lined up, but because you refused to betray what God put in you just to please people who didn't even see your value clearly. People said you were being too deep, too intense, too serious. But you weren't looking for applause, you were protecting your purpose. And now, the tables are turning. Someone who did choose the safe route, who followed the logic, who built their whole life off of fear disguised as strategy, they're empty. Their soul is tired, their spirit is dry, and now they're looking at you with new eyes. They see that you're still standing, still whole, still powerful, and they know why. You never sold out. You paid the price to stay in alignment. And because of that, they're drawn to you. Not out of pity, but out of respect. You did what they couldn't. And now they want to honor what they once ignored. Your refusal to settle became your elevation. Number 6. You didn't preach about loyalty, you proved it when there was no applause. You didn't make speeches about being loyal. You didn't parade your character around like it needed a spotlight. You simply showed up again and again, even when no one was watching, no one was clapping, and no one said thank you. You stayed loyal to your purpose, to the people God assigned to your journey, and most importantly, to what was right. Not because it was trending, not because it got attention, but because your integrity runs deep. When others disappeared, the moment recognition disappeared, you kept your word. You stayed rooted. That's not just rare, it's sacred. There were seasons when you felt invisible, like all your effort was being buried, like your consistency didn't matter, but you kept going anyway. You weren't doing it for applause, you were doing it out of conviction. You didn't show up just when it benefited you. You showed up even when it cost you emotionally, financially, mentally. And people noticed, but more importantly, the right person noticed. There's someone with real influence, someone who's been burned by fake loyalty over and over. They've watched people smile in their face and disappear the moment the benefits dried up. They've been surrounded by opportunists who play the role but never carry the heart. And then there's you. Quiet, consistent, steady, unwavering. You didn't try to impress them. You didn't even know they were watching. But they saw the way you stayed loyal when you could have left, the way you kept your integrity when compromise would have been easier, the way you did the right thing without needing a stage. That hit them differently, because what you carry can't be bought, it's built. They've decided they want to be connected to someone who values truth over attention, someone whose loyalty doesn't expire when the spotlight does. And now they're not just admiring you, they're about to invest in you. Your loyalty wasn't wasted. It was preparing you for a door that only opens for those who stayed true when no one was looking. Number 7. You were spiritually wealthy in a time where everyone else was emotionally bankrupt. While everyone else was scrambling for validation, addicted to attention, and exhausted from constantly trying to stay relevant, you took a different route. You chose to preserve your soul. You didn't try to fit into what was popular. You weren't chasing applause, followers, or likes. You were chasing peace, alignment, and depth, and because of that, you didn't burn out like the rest. You stayed whole while others crumbled under the weight of performing for approval. That wasn't luck. That was spiritual wisdom. You were spiritually rich in a time where emotional poverty was the norm. People looked shiny on the outside, but were empty on the inside. Constant drama, constant comparison, constant pretending. And in the middle of all that noise, you chose silence, reflection, truth, and real healing. You didn't need the world's noise to feel alive. You found your life in stillness. And that kind of spiritual wealth can't be copied. It can't be faked. It's either there or it's not. And with you, it's undeniably there. People thought you were being distant. They assumed you were falling behind. What they didn't see was that you were being preserved. While they were running themselves into the ground for clout, you were quietly becoming untouchable. You didn't move fast, but you moved with direction. You weren't loud, but your energy carried a depth they couldn't explain. You stayed aligned while others stayed addicted. Now, someone in power is taking notice. Someone who's surrounded by people who smile big but think small. They're exhausted by shallow connections and hidden agendas. And when they look at you, they don't just see peace, they see power without pretense. They see someone who isn't driven by ego, but by purpose. That kind of wealth is rare, and they want it in their corner. You didn't compete for the spotlight. You cultivated something sacred. And now someone with serious influence is ready to align with that. Not because you begged, but because you had what the world was too distracted to develop, soul wealth. And in this season, that's the real currency. Number 8, you didn't just avoid selling out. You built value while being ignored. You didn't take shortcuts. You didn't water yourself down. And you definitely didn't sell your soul just to be seen. While others were cutting corners and copying trends to gain quick attention, you stayed focused on building something real. You put in the work when no one was clapping, no one was sharing your name, and no one even cared if you existed. That kind of discipline doesn't just build skill, it builds substance. And that's exactly what makes you stand out now. You didn't wait for validation to start creating value. You weren't looking around for approval before you moved. You built in the dark. You prayed when it was just you and God. You showed up with excellence, even when your audience was zero. You gave your best, not because the world was watching, but because your spirit wouldn't let you do anything less. That's rare in a time where most people won't start unless they're guaranteed applause. The truth is, being overlooked didn't break you, it refined you. It stripped away any need to be accepted by the wrong people. You didn't rush your process, you didn't chase platforms, you became the platform. And while others were busy trying to go viral, you became vital. Your consistency and silence built momentum that no one could see until now. Because now, someone who can amplify voices, someone who's in the room most people are fighting to get into, has noticed you. And they're not interested in hype. They're done with loud, empty brands and hollow charisma. What they're drawn to is what you carry. Quiet power, tested value, and proven integrity. You didn't just survive being ignored, you grew in it. And now that person in power is ready to invest, not in who you're pretending to be, but in who you became while everyone else was distracted. They see the real worth now, and they're ready to put real weight behind it. Number 9. You let yourself be misunderstood because you knew truth doesn't need agreement. You let people misunderstand you, label you, talk behind your back, and twist your intentions, and you didn't rush to clear it up. Not because you didn't care, but because you understood a higher truth. Real clarity doesn't need crowd approval. You knew that truth stands even when no one agrees with it. That takes serious maturity, especially in a world where everyone's obsessed with defending themselves and being understood. But you had something deeper than a need to be liked. You had peace. And that peace wouldn't let you waste energy on pointless debates. You watched people laugh at your convictions, question your direction, and assume you were lost, all because you didn't explain yourself. But you weren't lost. You were laser-focused on what God told you. You were moving in divine timing, not public opinion. And instead of engaging every voice that tried to provoke you, you stayed grounded. You knew that truth isn't proved in conversation. It's proved in time. So you let them talk while you kept walking. Now, someone with real wisdom is noticing the difference. They see how you didn't chase validation. You didn't try to be understood by people who were never meant to get you. You held your position with quiet strength. And to them, that means everything. Because in a world full of noise, your silence spoke of depth. Your ability to resist the need to explain proved you had internal clarity that no one could shake. They've seen all the loud personalities and the over-explainers. They've seen people fight for attention and lose themselves in the process. But with you, they see something else. Someone who doesn't need the spotlight to know who they are. That kind of presence is unforgettable. And now they want to elevate it. Not because you asked, not because you performed, but because you stayed solid when most would have folded. They don't just see your clarity now. They trust it. And they want to bring it into spaces where truth is desperately needed. Number 10. You said no to doors. Everyone else was dying to walk through, and that marked you. You had the courage to say no to doors. Everyone else would have sold their soul to walk through. You saw the sparkle, the attention, the opportunity, but you also saw the strings attached, the compromise, the dilution of who you are. And instead of chasing the shine, you walked away with your dignity intact. That kind of decision doesn't just separate you, it marks you, not with applause but with authority. Because turning down what others crave means you know your worth without needing external proof. People questioned your choice. They told you were missing your big break. Some even looked at you like you were foolish for not grabbing what was right in front of you. But what they didn't understand is that your values weren't up for negotiation. You weren't looking to fit in. You were looking to stay in alignment. And you knew that not every open door is a blessing. Some doors are traps dressed in luxury. While others were stepping into positions that looked powerful, you chose to stand back and wait for the right path. You didn't settle for quick access. You were building something sacred that couldn't be bought or rushed. And that internal gold you carry, that quiet confidence, that solid truth, that spiritual integrity, is what's made you unforgettable to the right people. Now, someone with real influence has taken notice. Someone who's watched people walk through those glittery doors only to lose themselves on the other side. They've seen the fallout of fake success, and they're done with it. And in you, they see something different. You didn't beg to be picked. You chose yourself first, and that alone made you stand out. They don't want the ones who played the game. They want the one who walked away from it. And that's why they're seeking you out, not the crowd you left behind. Because when you said no, you didn't lose an opportunity. You proved you were one. Number 11. You stayed in the fire until your spirit was tempered, not burnt. You didn't run from the fire. You didn't beg to be rescued the moment things got hard. You stayed. You stayed through betrayal, confusion, spiritual warfare, rejection, and the kind of loneliness that makes most people compromise just to feel seen again. But you didn't fold. You didn't let the heat consume you. You let it forge you. That's the difference. While others were trying to avoid the pain, you let it shape something inside you that comfort never could. You allowed God to use the fire not to destroy you, but to refine you. That's why you don't break easy. That's why your presence hits different now. You came out of that fire with a stillness people can't quite explain. There's a weight to you now, a quiet authority, a spiritual maturity that only comes from being crushed and still choosing to rise. You didn't rush the process. You let it do what it needed to do, even when it hurt, even when you didn't understand it. And because of that, you don't walk into rooms like everyone else. You shift them. Not because you're loud, but because you've been deeply processed. Now, someone with serious influence just felt that weight. They don't even know why they're drawn to you yet, but they are. Because there's something about you that feels real in a world that's gone plastic. They've met polished people. They've met successful people. But what they haven't met is someone who carries the scars of fire but still walks in peace. That's you. They see it now. You didn't skip the pain, and that's why you're trusted with the promise. You didn't fake your way to the top. You were forged into someone who can handle it. And that kind of spiritual weight? That's exactly what this person in power is searching for. Not for show, but for real alignment. They respect what you went through. They respect who you became. And now, they're ready to open doors for the one who walked through fire and came out refined, not ruined. Number 12. You let your faith age like wine while everyone else wanted soda pop miracles. You didn't chase overnight success. You didn't beg for quick miracles, fast turnarounds, or instant breakthroughs. You let your faith breathe. You let it stretch, break, rebuild, and deepen. While others were desperate for flashy results and public wins, you were letting God do something lasting in you. You understood that real growth doesn't happen at the speed of applause. It happens in seasons of obscurity, repetition, and refinement. And you didn't fight that. You embraced it. You weren't interested in soda pop miracles, those quick, fizzy bursts that look exciting but disappear just as fast. You knew the kind of calling on your life required depth, and depth takes time. So you didn't just wait. You matured in the waiting. You didn't just stand still. You were being seasoned, quietly, thoroughly. And that kind of development shows in ways that can't be faked. People wondered why things didn't take off for you right away, why you weren't moving faster, why you weren't doing what everyone else was doing. But what they didn't realize is that you weren't building for a moment. You were building for longevity. You were becoming the kind of person who can carry what others collapse under. That takes divine patience. That takes spiritual discipline. And now it's showing. Because someone with real reach, someone who's seen it all, is paying attention. They've seen people rise fast and fall faster. They've seen hype, glamour, and gimmicks implode under pressure. But you're different. You didn't blow up, you grew up. And that's what makes you rare. That's what makes you valuable. They recognize the steady hand, the wisdom in your timing, the substance in your silence. And they're ready to invest, not in the surface, but in the root system you've developed. You didn't rush the process. You respected it. And now that patience, that slow-cooked spiritual richness, is exactly what's making powerful people look your way. Because they don't want fireworks. They want foundations, and you have it. Number 13. You never needed a pulpit because your life was the sermon. You didn't beg for a mic. You didn't build your life around being seen, praised, or platformed. While others were doing everything they could to be the center of attention, you were living the message in silence. You let your pain preach. You let your scars testify. And without ever announcing it, you became the sermon people didn't even know they needed. Not because you were performing, but because you were becoming something sacred through your walk. You didn't need a pulpit to prove you had something to say. Your integrity spoke louder than any title. Your consistency in private, your kindness under pressure, your refusal to turn bitter when life went sideways, that's what made you unforgettable. While others curated an image, you cultivated substance. You didn't rehearse sound bites. You lived them. You didn't quote verses. You became a walking revelation of endurance, forgiveness, and spiritual maturity. People overlooked you because you weren't loud. You didn't hustle to be noticed, but someone who understands real impact has been watching you closely. They've seen how you carry truth in your presence, not just in your words. They've watched people with big platforms fall apart behind the scenes, while you quietly kept walking with character and conviction. And now they're not just intrigued, they're inspired. This person isn't looking for another influencer. They're not impressed by hype or numbers. They're looking for someone whose life embodies the truth, not just talks about it. And in you, they see the depth, the authenticity, the lived-out wisdom that no spotlight can fabricate. You didn't try to be viral. You became vital, necessary, grounded, real. Now they're ready to partner, not to preach at you, not to help you perform, but to amplify what's already rooted in you. Because what you carry didn't come from books or branding. It came from surviving the wilderness with your soul intact. And that's the kind of presence the world needs more of. Quiet, tested, and undeniably powerful. Number 14. You scared systems because you chose kingdom. You didn't play by their rules, and that's exactly what made them nervous. While everyone else was busy following systems, chasing titles, and submitting to structures built on control, you were answering to a higher call. You chose the kingdom over conformity. You refused to shrink into roles they created for you. You didn't just disrupt the system, you exposed its limits. And the truth is, you weren't trying to rebel. You were obeying a king they couldn't see, and that obedience made you unpredictable in a world obsessed with control. They called you rebellious, difficult, uncooperative. But it wasn't rebellion for rebellion's sake, it was holy defiance. You weren't disrespecting authority, you were honoring higher authority. You walked away from toxic opportunities. You said no when they expected blind yeses. You stood your ground when you were supposed to bow. Not out of ego, but out of conviction. And because of that, you became a threat to everything fake, political, or manipulative. They didn't know what to do with someone they couldn't buy, flatter, or shame into submission. But now, someone within the system, someone who actually has influence and understands power dynamics, is starting to see it clearly. They've watched people play by the rules and still get chewed up and spit out. They've seen gifted voices silenced just because they didn't conform. But then there's you, standing firm, unshaken, unapologetically kingdom-minded, and now it's clicking for them. You're not dangerous, you're divine strategy in disguise. You weren't trying to tear down systems, you were built to outlast them. You're the answer they didn't even know they needed. Your refusal to submit to what was broken didn't disqualify you, it proved you were called to rebuild something better. Now that observer, the one who quietly dismissed you before, is watching with new eyes. And they're not just impressed, they're ready to align. Because they realize the very thing that made you a threat to the system makes you a solution to what the system can't fix. You didn't chase fame. You didn't fight to be chosen. You simply chose faith, when it was inconvenient, when it was costly, and when no one was watching. You let your silence speak volumes, your convictions shape your steps, and your pain refine your presence. You took the long road when the shortcuts were lined with applause. You stayed true when it would have been easier to sell out. You let God build you in the shadows while everyone else was fighting for the stage. And now, something sacred is shifting. The same people who once overlooked you are circling back in disbelief. But more importantly, someone with real reach, someone who knows the difference between hype and holiness, has been watching quietly. And they're not moved by your resume. They're moved by your resilience. They see what God has shaped in you, the integrity, the clarity, the divine discipline, and they're ready to honor what couldn't be bought, broken, or boxed in. You weren't waiting to be discovered, you were busy becoming. And now that becoming is drawing the right kind of attention. Not from the crowd you left behind, but from someone who's been searching for exactly what you carry. You are the proof that slow faith builds unshakable foundations, that loyalty in private unlocks honor in public, that spiritual wealth outlasts trendy success. And now the reward isn't just spiritual, it's tangible. Doors are opening, alignments are forming, and recognition is flowing from the most unexpected places. Because you didn't just believe in God, you followed him, even when it made no sense. And now, heaven isn't the only one applauding. Earth is responding too. This message spoke to your spirit and confirmed what you've been carrying in silence. Don't keep it to yourself. Like this video so it reaches more people who need this truth. Drop a comment below if you're one of the ones who chose faith over fear and felt every word. Subscribe to the channel because this is not just content, it's confirmation. And share this with someone else who's been fighting battles in the dark, waiting for their divine moment. Your story is powerful, your faith is rare, and your time is now. Let's grow this family of truth carriers, faith walkers, and kingdom disruptors. See you in the next one. And remember, you didn't miss it. It's just now starting. God bless you.